Howdy, and welcome back to episode 7 of Roundup. After a short hiatus, I suppose university will do that to students like Luther and I, but we're back. We've got a massive recap episode. But before we jump into anything else, massive thanks as always to Snowball for helping us sort of put this show out, and Blue with their amazing microphone and audio equipment to help us sort of also, let you guys hear what we have to say. Yeah, there we go. I pulled it together. How you been, Luth?
Been pretty good. I mean, like you said, uni.
Yeah.
The absolute pain of the assignment grind's been definitely upon us as well. But other than that, been getting back into doing a fair bit of the casting stuff as well, and just been flat out, mate. Honestly,
Can't get you off that casting couch.
Oh, absolutely not, mate.
Cool.
Absolutely not.
Well, I suppose we'll jump straight into it. So it's obviously been a while for our regular listeners, but we've had a ton of events to get through. So I think we'll start with them, and we'll just sort of work our way through it. There's some news that will be sprinkled out within it, but I think we may as well start it. I don't know if it was the most recent. I don't think it was the most recent event, right? The Epic RMR. Essentially,
certainly has been one of the most prominent.
Exactly, and I think
talked about, given
that's why I definitely want to start with this, because it's supposed to be our our pathway to the major. It's whether we see Renegades, very likely, or a team like Order or Direwolves potentially make their way to what is going to be the biggest event and sort of the return to land for our game in 2021. But it was very hotly contested, and I don't know, maybe you can sort of hit some of the big points of why that was.
Oh, where do I start, Ash? That's okay. All right. Well, there's a fair few things that we could hit about this RMR, about the general production quality of it overall, how seeding, apparently there were rumors here and there that seeding was done by Face It Elo.
Allegedly.
Allegedly. No, but it's just overall, it's been such a stark contrast compared to what we've had for our previous pathways for the major. When you look at before we had this RMR system, and even when we've had RMR events here, where they've generally been, fairly acceptable in the way they've been run and fairly, professional in how things have gone, there hasn't really been much of an uproar about the RMR events we've had so far, right? But even if we look before that, before they changed it, back when Rio was still going ahead, when we had direct qualification paths, when we had direct open qualifiers that were run by TOs like ESL, DreamHack, on ESEA servers, there wasn't really anything to complain about too much, because, well, it's as any good tournament should be. If there are no issues with how things are being run, then everything should be pretty well seamless. If the administration or the production is done well, it should be pretty well invisible to the average viewer. That is the complete and utter opposite of what I can say about this RMR, without a doubt. So let's start, I think, just general production. So the thing that really annoyed a lot of people, just from a spectator point of view, was how Epicenter went about choosing the talent for this event.
Yeah.
And of course, the guys who did get picked to do it, absolutely no disrespect to them, because obviously, given the circumstances, given that they self-admittedly weren't very familiar with Australian CS, which, understandable, we're a small region, there was quite a few things where they didn't really understand what they were talking about, and where it just kind of begged the question, why didn't we see local talent getting picked for this event? Apparently, a lot of people had, tried to inquire about it and try to get in for it, but that was just one thing. Between matches that were completely unwatchable because of the observing, between games where it just was a whole wreck, really.
Yeah.
It was a real disappointment to see that this is how we're getting our RMRs now, and that this is what the kind of quality that we're being served up.
I think there's sort of two things floating around in my head, and it's sort of a realization yet again that our region is continually shunned, I suppose, just due to our sort of population, how many teams and players we have. But I agree that that's not necessarily an excuse for incompetent events to be run like this, and something that was consistent with the OCE and the CIS RMR was, they're run by the same people, both abysmally run. But when you look at the quality of, of course, Flashpoint had its issues, but especially the Summit RMR in where we saw, Extremum in North America. When you look at what could be done and what we got, it's just kind of a bit, really, it is really, really annoying in that sense. I agree. I don't think the production in that sense was up to scratch. The casters, again, a bit of devil's advocate, right, for at least the casters who did get chosen, the non-domestic ones, like, they can only play the ball that was thrown in their court. So,
absolutely.
No issue with them. Would we be just as angry, again, devil's advocate, right? Would we be just as angry if OCE casters got the chance to do the European RMR? Like, I don't know. Overall, though, I think it was really, really just sort of weird. Especially the open seating and all that. Oh man, there's just so many little things, and they just all add up. It's like on its own, I can understand why each thing is an issue, but all up, it just felt like such a frankly shit RMR event.
Yeah.
But yeah, in terms of results, I would say, if we look past all the production stuff, the results went pretty as expected, minus maybe Rooster sneaking up. But, from the top down, Renegades finished on top against Order. And then third and fourth went to Rooster and Direwolves. So what do we start? We'll start with like Renegades and Order. Now that Renegades are back, Order are the top dogs while they were gone. Do you see the rivalry there?
I mean, I think that's going to be the case for any teams that are in that first, second place, no matter what, right? Where, if we did see a team like Chiefs, Direwolves, etc., kind of continually contesting that second spot while Renegades was away and, Order still hitting that first, I think you could say very much the same about there being a very close rivalry between those teams. But instead, it's just been this rivalry between Renegades and Order, which has continued back for quite a while. I think Order, look, they're certainly looking to be, with the exception of Renegades, they're certainly looking to be in the best position domestically.
Yeah.
Without a doubt, they're looking to be at this absolute top form where they're just really tearing shit up. They're just like, they've got a whole mix of talent there. They're really good and they're really fun to watch. And I really want to see this Order roster improve because I think there is that drive with the players there as well to get better, to improve as much as possible, try to overtake Renegades in that sense. And I think, these results pretty well reflect that. I think Renegades still, obviously at the moment, it's pretty easy to say that they have not been topped, but I think Order at the moment, they're really rising to the occasion. They're really taking advantage of everything that's been handed to them. And, well, that's been showing in how they've been going domestically overall in the last, this year overall, really, ever since Vexite joined the team, all those months ago.
Yeah.
It's really shown how Order is really transformed since that point as well.
It's hard against Renegades, right? It's a team with so much experience, so much clutch at the death. You get into an OT and you start to panic and they're a little more on top of it just because they know that they're a bit better than you. I definitely rate the back and forward, especially seeing, Order did punch them into the lower bracket there. And then the final was essentially the same maps and Renegades just had the endurance, lasted. I think both went to OT. 1916 on Inferno, on 1917 on Dust. So, there's not a lot you can do sometimes, but, this time last year when this was going on, it was just Renegades just punching everybody down. And now there's like some, contenders in there, which is quite impressive. I really like it.
I think the fact that Order were able to take a series off them at all when Renegades on paper, they should in all rights be a vastly stronger team. They're the one team that's still based in OC that has had a fair bit of international experience has, gone up against some of these top level players from other regions and gotten that experience. And then 16-year-old Vexite just comes in the server after a long day of school and just absolutely kicks the shit out of them. It's great. It's really nice to see how Order are really just showing themselves to be incredibly competitive.
Yeah.
And I'm really keen to see how I think the rest of this overall season goes with Renegades back. I mean, we'll get into the Premier stuff in a bit, but light foreshadowing, their Direwolves as well looking really strong.
Yeah, well, let's jump into some of the best of the rest. I think Rooster are a bit of a weird one for me, just because throughout this event they played with some different rosters across all the different games, which is a whole other discussion. But I think while Rooster looked good, Direwolves are supposed to be this next one down, the sort of number 3 ranked team. But how far out do you put them from being like up with Order, up with Renegades?
See, that's the thing, as you said, because we haven't really had a chance to see them very much, right? It's incredibly hard to say.
Yeah.
Because they, from what I understand, it was time reasons. It was because of a bunch of things out of their control. They did swap a bunch of players around, and it doesn't seem like they maybe have as much of a solid lineup as we'd hope to see. But that being said, among these Rooster players, there is a whole lot of talent. It is apparently clear in players like ASAP, for example, who are just so sharp in the server, who just absolutely show up at every possible opportunity. It really makes me sad to see that some of these players aren't able to play certain leagues or are, have been sanctioned, because I really want to see more from these players. I really want to see, I would love to see Rooster playing this next season of ANZ Champs. I'd really love to see, because they're really good.
Yeah.
It's really entertaining CS. But I suppose we'll see what happens with that. I suppose we'll see. It's just kind of a weird spot to put them at the moment, because they're in a weird spot overall.
Would you say there was any other sort of standout results or matches that went a weird way at the RMR, or outside of that, were you sort of expecting it to unfold in this way?
I very much think that in terms of first place Renegades, second place Order, kind of going from there, Direwolves placing 4th, it all makes sense. It all seems to be kind of what we would expect.
Yeah.
Because these teams at the moment, that's just kind of the way things have been going for a while, where we've seen these same kind of placements, we've seen these same kind of things, and I think it's going to be really interesting to see how these teams go. And again, also teams like Vertex, Paradox placing 5th to 6th as well. I really want to see more from them, especially Paradox as well.
Yeah,
100%. But I think that kind of top 6 position in terms of how teams at the moment are going is pretty well cemented. It seems to be very locked into that, and I think that's definitely something that's going to keep things really interesting to see if things change from here.
Yeah, 100%. I think something else that was really interesting that we can, kind of transition into was another event that was maybe a little less expected, but very interesting. And that was the Hyperion OEL Guam event that happened a while ago. I know you casted the event. I know you got to see all kinds of wacky, awesome Asian CS. But
oh my god, yeah, it was an experience, man.
If we focus on at least the CS for a second, I know a lot of the Australian teams. I think Vertex was the top placing team. They finished in that 7th to 8th. I know a lot of them just kind of went in just sort of this is a bit of a fun event to play, and I think a lot of the CS that we saw when the servers were working reflected that. There was definitely some wacky stuff going on. Did you enjoy the event? I think it definitely lived up to its sort of excitement. I definitely saw that in the players with their tweeting, the players I got to speak to afterwards. I thought it was very fun to watch. The idea was very cool.
I mean, obviously the thing that you can say with the unfortunate thing is that you can say with any of the results of this event is that, especially when it comes to those games that were played on the Guam servers, which they obviously very much were still beta testing. There were still a lot of things for them to work out. No getting around that. Eventually, it did get to the point where, for the same region games, they would just they backed off to using Faceit servers. But on the last day, they did finally actually get the Guam servers working, and to quite a high standard, and they actually played the best of 5 grand final on the Guam servers, and the teams were happy with it. It went from what was definitely quite the shit show on the first and second day.
Yeah,
there's no way around that, to an experience that was quite interesting for both the Asia and OC regions and the teams from those regions that did play the event. But I'm hoping that we'll be able to see another similar experimental style of event, even if the difference between an event like this though and the RMR in terms of when there were things going awry is that the difference is this was a very experimental put on event just to try and
didn't really mean anything.
Yeah, it was just a fun event with a bit of a prize pool behind it compared to being a literal major qualifier for the biggest event of the year. But other than that, I think that's where I'm willing to give this event a lot more leniency in terms of how things went. And not just saying that because I was working on it, but
well, look, I think
it was interesting to watch as well.
I think I'll have to come clean with everybody here and just let everyone know I'm not a network specialist, so I don't necessarily know if they do another event like this, if we'll see the same kind of improvement from the sense all the people I spoke to, players, day one unplayable. That's what they said. It was just unplayable. Yeah. But, they spoke to people at Hyperion and OneCode who were doing all the server stuff. And, they got their ping down to 90. And it was, while it was still big latencies, it was playable. So, maybe next time around, if you can see the improvement they went at this event from day one to day 3 or 4, if you do it again at another event and see how much more improvement you can go. Again, not a network specialist, but I think that for me, my big thing is if you can get this playable, what's stopping teams from pracking against, D13 and all that kind of stuff? Something, a lot of the players are talking about leading into RMRs, leading into big events. The teams here don't want to prack against each other because you just spoil your strats and then teams aren't pracking as much and, all this stuff. But if you can just get into a server and prack against some Mongolian teams, some Indonesian teams, do your prack there, I think that there's a lot of really cool potential just with the technology that this event was kind of trying to showcase.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that the idea of having the Guam servers and having things be run on it is definitely, it's a really cool idea because, again, the whole thought of bridging these two regions together and kind of creating something that's very new, very exciting, it's really awesome. And if they're able to get it all working and off the ground floor and, everything works as intended, obviously it took a bit, but even still, the players that did play the event, including the Vertex players, were saying that compared to the first day and the last that they played, it was a night and day difference.
Oh yeah,
in terms of how things went. So I think just that in mind, if they're able to continue improving things, it's obviously not going to be players aren't going to have 30 ping to these servers.
Yeah.
I think that there's definitely some expectations that need to be lowered a little bit in that regard. But even still, 70 to 90 ping for both these teams. There were games there where we had, I think the last game that Paradox played, I was in the GoTV and just holding tab and seeing players from both of these regions on what looked to be about equivalent ping.
Yeah, it's cool to see,
really
100%.
It's really awesome. I'm hoping to see more from these guys. I really am, because I think there's a lot more to come and a lot more interesting things that will hopefully unfold as this initiative continues.
Yeah. We'll go into something a little more, some would say a little more boring, some would say the height of Australian CS. But since we last did an episode of Roundup, have just essentially missed the entire regular season of ESEA Premier. So the playoffs, the whole bracket's ready to go. So I guess we can just sort of talk on the bracket and reflect on the season, which is good because, sometimes, you look at every season of Premier, there's lots of massive 2-0s. I think there was a double 16-0 in there from Direwolves. I forget who that was against. Was that Overperformers? There's, heaps of FFs, but the whole season's done, and we've got the playoff bracket, which we'll go through. But have you been keeping in touch with a lot of Premier this season? Thoughts? I'm looking at this top 8, and it kind of looks very what we'd expect.
I mean, I think the one thing as well that I did just want to bring up before we get into that is there was one recent result that, we won't go through everything because there's obviously been a lot that's happened in the time since we've been doing the regular episodes. But there is one result in particular I just want to pick out and talk about real quick because it definitely was quite a surprise. And that one was the game of Renegades versus Direwolves that happened on the 16th, just 3 days ago, as of recording. You'd think that would be maybe a 2-0 or something like that, or maybe a 2-1 to Renegades. That looked like Renegades' game.
Yeah.
From map number 1, which was a 16-4 on Overpass, it certainly looked like that should have been Renegades' game. But then Direwolves, they got themselves a 16-9 on Dust 2 to bring it to Mirage, third map, where they won in overtime 19-16. That's completely unexpected. A 2-1 win by Direwolves, reverse sweeping Renegades of all teams.
I'm always super impressed with this is just like irrelevant, but like side tangent. I'm always super impressed with Direwolves and Dust 2. I think they're the best Dust 2 like team in the region, like by a long shot. They are really, really, really good at that map. But overall that whole series was, I imagine you look at it and it was for what team goes through their group 8-0. So, Renegades finished 7-1, and maybe, it's not massively important to Renegades, means a lot more to Direwolves, right? But I don't think that, detracts in any way, shape or form from the achievement that it takes for these Direwolves players to best, the best team.
And it should be, I mean, it's not just the best team in the sense that when Order was around, this is a team that, that went to ESL Pro League not that long ago, and they've had all these big pickups, and they've, probably got the biggest backing behind them at this point in terms of international awareness and in terms of where they are. And then meanwhile, while they've been doing all that, and they've had, some international scrims, played some events overseas, and then now just come back, and now not necessarily like hugely struggling, but they certainly have been looking a little bit less untouchable than I think everyone was thinking when they saw, Renegades is playing Premier this season.
Yeah.
Because that's not only Direwolves now that has taken a series against them in the last few weeks, but that's also Order as well, who were able to take that one off them in the RMR to knock them down to the lower bracket. And yeah, I think that's, even though it's just a couple games, I think it certainly does say a lot about how I think that these teams domestically certainly are improving and how things are kind of coming together. And it's certainly got to be a huge morale boost to these players as well. You've just seen, they've just watched these guys overseas at ESL Pro League, and now they've come back and, now we just got a 2-1 against them tonight. Just a random, just on a random Wednesday night. Like,
it must be good to see the teams, if you look at Renegades and see them, if it bleeds, we can kill it, right? If one team can take them down, now that Direwolves have done it, watch out, Paradox will anti-strat you and take you to 3 maps and maybe steal a series. Chiefs with their new lineup, which we'll get to, might be able to do it. Vertex, it's scary. For Renegades, at least, it's really exciting for all these other teams. We'll quickly bang through the bracket. So what's happened now that Direwolves have topped their group, they're starting up the top, and they're playing against Vertex. And then their other matchup on that side of the bracket is, Rooster. Direwolves and Rooster. And then Vertex are playing against Paradox. And then on the bottom side, we've got Renegades playing Chiefs first up, and Riot against Order. So interesting. Got Order and Renegades on the same side of the bracket now. So I imagine we'll see one of them in the lower bracket potentially trying to make the final through that. But in terms of the top 8, this is pretty expected. It just is going to be how the seeding plays out.
Yeah, 100%. I think that you can certainly predict some of these matches, but then some of them also look to be, kind of wild cards. Like I think Rooster, for example, has been one of those teams that certainly is a wild card pick.
Yeah.
While Direwolves, they were able to get that win against Renegades, and they've been looking really strong. At the same time, it could entirely be the case that Rooster just come up and absolutely surprise, or they just get absolutely kicked down to that lower bracket. Like, it really could go either way. But Vertex versus Paradox, going to be very interesting to see how both these teams go, because they're very well in the same sort of level where they're kind of, they've got the same sort of tournament results.
Same sort of like roster moves as well. I know Paradox have had a recent move. Vertex have obviously had a lot of moves this year. So they're sort of they sort of signify where like the cutoff is for, are you in the top echelons of the region or not? But yeah, definitely, right? Like that's a very, very like similar skill matchup there.
Yeah, I think, and then Renegades versus Chiefs. I think that we'll talk about what's going on with Chiefs in the next segment, but even still, despite the recent changes they've made, Renegades, on paper at least, should have this one in the bag.
Yeah.
And Riot versus Order, I think you can say the same about Order, albeit Riot has also been looking, fairly decent for where their kind of positioning has been, in terms of like where their kind of tier is on that Premier ladder and where they kind of fit into the scene overall. But look, some really interesting matches coming out in that playoffs bracket. I'm really keen to see if any teams can really top Renegades in this event as well, which obviously is kind of the big thing about this season, is the return of Renegades.
Yeah.
But also really keen to see how all the rest of these teams go and see if there's going to be any upset results. They're hard to predict, but I think if I had to predict the opening matches, I'd probably say I would go with Direwolves taking their opener against Rooster, but I could definitely see Rooster getting a map at the very least. I think I could say the same about Vertex, but I think it could go very close against Paradox, and it could be, could go either way. Renegades versus Chiefs, I'm just going to say 2-0 to Renegades. And Riot versus Order, I think same to Order, but that's where I'm. How are you feeling about it?
I think I would go exactly the same as you, except I definitely see Paradox beating Vertex.
Okay.
I think it'll be like a 3-mapper, but I have seen so much more I like from Paradox, despite the fact that they've just made a change. But I just don't think Vertex have hit their stride yet. On paper, I think while these teams, it should be very close. I just see Paradox taking it. If they play the series 10 times, Paradox take it 7.
Yeah, that completely that makes sense, I think. I'm very keen to see how this goes, though. It's going to be a really interesting next few days of games, and it's going to be really interesting to see how all that goes. But yeah, I'm really keen.
Cool. Well, let's rip the Band-Aid off. Let's do the rosters real quick. We'll do Chiefs. Chiefs announced their roster. There's, they've had players hop in and out for a while now. The most recent sort of change was Apoc Dud leaving, and he's been, associated with this team, their core for ages. I still get those menu log ads. But exactly. We saw Motion sort of be associated with this lineup for a while. Blitz was playing for a bit, but the big one coming back into the lineup is well, not back in, but coming into the lineup is Maker. After he's freed from his ESEA ban. So the full lineup is Gump, Humongous, Motion, Maker, and Blitz. So what do you sort of think about this team on paper, at least?
It's okay. Well, going through piece by piece, I think Motion is one we all saw coming. He's been playing with them for quite a fair bit, and I am kind of surprised it took them that long to make it official. Maker as well, I think, is a huge pickup. I think Maker definitely fits well into this team. But I think the overall thing with Chiefs at the moment still is that I kind of want to hope, and like for their sake, that this is finally a lineup that's actually going to have some stability to it, because under this Chiefs organization, every season they've been swapping players back and forth. You know, they've been trying all these new different things. They had Val in last season. They had like all these other things, but it's been really interesting to see how they've gone. I just don't. Obviously, it just looks like they weren't able to get the results down, and they just made the change really quick. I just hope they don't jump to that again. I'm just hoping that they can kind of. The problem with a lot of OC teams, is just the fact that they can't hold stability. Is that they just, you know, if things don't go right after one season, we're gonna have to swap this player out and get this player in, and you know, just chill, guys. Like the number one team or the number 1 and 2 teams in this region, Renegades and Order respectively. The one reason why they've been doing so good, I think, or at least one of the reasons, is that they've just held a lineup and only made small incremental changes. They only moved in Vexite, for example, their last change, which was about 4 or 5 months ago now.
Yeah, and they had to.
5 months. Because Alistair left for Renegades, and they very much so bided their time, and they took the absolute best possible move they could in that circumstance. And wow, it's paid off for both of these teams, I feel like.
100%.
But meanwhile, Chiefs, they've definitely been kind of floundering around and just getting whatever up and comer they can, just try and fit in and then take them out after a season and then do this and that. And they just need to chill and just hope that with this 5, which again looks like a very solid 5, that they just finally find some stability and just start taking some results back. It's definitely going to be a bit of a path, especially in the current climate of the season and how teams are going. But yeah, I think
it still must sting after having Vexite on your lineup for the whole year, and then now he's just on Order, just wrecking you every week. Like that would hurt.
Yeah,
but
it would.
I know we covered Vertex's changes off last episode. So that's actually, I didn't even I still think that happened last week, even though it's happened ages ago now. But the other big one was Danger. Looks like he's left Paradox. I'm not sure if it's official, but if you look everywhere and you look at who's actually playing in the server, it looks like this has sort of been the change. And they've brought in Zeph, because I know we were wondering where he would end up a couple episodes ago. But here we are. What do you kind of think about this?
Again, it makes some sense. I think Zeph definitely looks to be a pretty sharp player. Looks like someone that's going to be really interesting to see how they go in this lineup. Paradox overall, as you said, have kind of found themselves to be quite this interesting team to look at, where, you know, you were saying a while back, people were all sleeping on Paradox, and I agreed, people definitely were sleeping on Paradox, but now it seems people are kind of realizing that, hey, this is a team that definitely is showing themselves to have a lot more potential, and, you know, they're bringing it back there. They're doing some really good stuff. So I think this pickup, I'm not really sure how their kind of dynamic will go without Danger, but I do think that Zeph, in any case, is just a good pickup all over.
He's been around. He's played on, you know, teams like Order.
Exactly.
He's got a lot of experience, I think. So looking at a team like Paradox, I've always liked it because they've had a very healthy mix of everything. I really like their coach. I really like the way that they approach the map pool. The way that they play is a good mix of, you know, it's the classic OCE, just shoot everyone's heads, but it's also, I think they have, excellent map pool strategies on the map. You know, they can slow it down, they can speed up the rounds, like pace-wise. So I'm hoping Zeph can bring something, you know, hopefully an extra couple of gears in Paradox, because we know that they can take maps, but let's see them take some series off some of the bigger teams, right?
Yeah, I'd love to see it. I'd love to see Paradox really come into further into form. I mean, I really like just seeing all these teams getting better as well, because the more improvements we have overall, and the more entertaining CS we get to talk about, and the more you know, the more fun the matches are to watch. I mean, there's certainly a lot going on in this region where it's just, I think there has been that kind of happening where, you know, those few results against Renegades where, you know, they're, you know, if it bleeds, we can kill it. That kind of mentality going in. That's certainly got to be a huge mental booster to a lot of these teams as they go up against what they thought was once untouchable, you know, going through 2020. And now they're all looking much stronger, and all these teams are looking like, we can just continually continue keep improving and get ourselves into this strong position. And yeah, all these teams seemingly are doing that. All the teams we've been talking about have been looking, I think, stronger than they were last year, by a fair amount. It's really great to see.
There's a little quick thing I wanted to tag on, and we were talking about this before we were recording because with all your casting going on with the LPL at the moment, you've gotten the chance to actually watch and cast a lot of Ancient. But I look at sorry, that's my trigger word. Don't say Ancient.
Oh, you're bringing back memories, mate.
But if you look at all these events that we've spoken about, the RMR, Premier so far, we are really yet to see the top 6 play this map at all, really. I can't think of a very meaningful map on Ancient yet I'm sure they're scrimming, I'm sure they're pracking it, but I think, are you excited, thoughts on Ancient aside, are you excited to see the top teams sort of play it out in the context of, instead of train? Because I don't think we really saw a lot of train in Australia anyway. I know some teams loved it, but we definitely play a lot more Inferno, Overpass, and Mirage. So where do you see Ancient sort of coming into the pool? I know some teams, I think Vertex are definitely going to pull out some nerd shit. Paradox are definitely going to, hopefully incorporate that into their pool. So what are you thinking?
Well, I think the first thing to say is that all the teams have been playing it to some degree, at the very least. We know that for a fact.
Yeah.
At the very least in FPL, as straight away when it dropped, players were picking this and they were like, hell yeah, I want to plug on a new map. And, some learning and picking up smokes and, just trying to find a little bit of strategy, even if it's pretty base level.
Yeah.
Ancient, look, I've got to be honest. I haven't really said it too much, but at the moment, I'm not a huge fan of the map overall.
Yeah.
Just in terms of the actual map itself. But as you said, under that lens of, hey, it's a new map for teams to experiment on and a new map for teams to pick up and strategize on. It's definitely going to be really interesting to see. I got the chance to cast a map of it for LPL Challenger, which I'm doing now on Thursday nights, by the way, quick plug. So feel free to come tune in. But I managed to cast a game where 8ballers, who, not a team we've talked about much here, and, we'll see how they get to. Maybe they will get towards the top of things if they keep going on this upward trajectory. But being a team that has been very unconventional in the way they've gone about things, a lot of people were memeing on them for boot camping in CGA when they were doing stuff. But in the last 6 months, they've gone from playing amateur to challenger now. They've gone up 4 divisions. So it came as no surprise that if any team I was going to be watching was to pick Ancient, it would be them. And they did that, and then they got kicked in by a team towards the end who had 15 minutes of smoke crack.
Nice.
Because it just seems very much like T sides of that map. If you have a little bit of knowledge on smokes and a little bit of things like that, I think it can be very one-sided on a team level. That's just what I've seen so far anyway. It's definitely something I got to play more in, personally, and learn the map myself.
Yeah,
but
I think there's a lot to come.
Yeah. I think a lot of teams in this region, at the very least, though, are very keen to experiment on it. It's going to be a while before we see it, I think, played at the top level here. If we're going to start seeing more Ancient, I think it's going to start at that lower level, like Challenger, for example.
Yeah.
Where I think we're going to see some of the teams that don't really have as defined of a strat book or as defined of, a mentality to go in, like a lot of these top teams who kind of get trapped in that same sort of thinking. That's going to be the point where I think we start seeing a bit more experimentation, and then it'll actually, I think it could trickle upwards in that regard. Likewise, we'll also see what the international pro scene does, and whatever gets played at the next EU RMR or whatever. I'm certain some of those strats will make their way overseas back here to Australia. So.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure what our next big event that'll use it in the pool will be. I imagine ANZ Champs might I
I think they would, yeah.
don't think this playoffs of Premier is using it. I think the whole season stays the same map pool. Otherwise, the next RMR should use it, right? It's just the first ones that aren't. I don't know.
So.
I can't actually confirm or deny that. But again, the events are coming, and I'm very excited. I personally like Ancient a lot. I miss Train. Yeah. I also like Train, but
I miss
I'm
Train.
just happy to have something that's there's a little less verticality in it, because Nuke and Vertigo give me headaches and motion sickness.
God.
But
if they added one more map with verticality in it, I think I'd just be so done. Honestly,
yeah, straight.
I like Vertigo, but
straight to Valorant. No, I said the forbidden word.
Let's not go that far, Ash.
Well, let's head far geographically and jump into some international stuff. There's been a lot. I've been watching my sleep schedule in the bin as usual. I've been watching a lot of Blast, a lot of Complexity, all that jazz. But I think the biggest thing that's happened internationally, at least, that the Aussies have any concern with, is Mousesports taking the trophy at Flashpoint Season 3, which was also the RMR event, in that series against NIP. Amazing, right? Like, this is huge. If you look on Dexter's HLTV profile, because I was looking at it earlier, that's his only trophy on there at the moment, because they don't really rate the OCE trophies very high, but he just is just a Flashpoint trophy on his profile, which is really, really cool.
Oh, I love it. It's look, it's definitely been a bit of a journey. I think the last episode that we did a month and a half ago, we were definitely being fairly critical of things not quite going right overall for the Aussies abroad.
Yeah,
and how things weren't really looking to the point
there weren't results at the time, right? And we could only comment on what was in front of us, which frankly we saw a struggling Complexity, an Extremum that weren't really playing, and Mousesports just sort of some pieces that weren't quite put together yet. But this is not only these pieces weren't for a puzzle; these pieces were for a fucking tank, man. And Dexter's slapped them all together and just sort of let loose.
I love it. I think we always said, though, one thing that I think we were a bit consistent on was that with Dexter going to Mousesports, it would take a bit of time to get things right, and that
as an IGL, it has to.
Yeah. I think the morons in Twitch chat that initially were crying out, "Oh, Dexter's such a terrible pickup," I can't believe I lost $500 betting on a team with a new IGL. Those fucking idiots. Yeah. No, I think it always was going to take a bit of time, and it does look like with the way Mousesports are going, they're certainly finally getting to that point where it's now things are starting to really pay off, and they're starting to look a lot stronger. I mean, that's a huge message. That's an OC IGL leading a team internationally to take an RMR event in Europe. Just put that in perspective from where we came a couple of years ago for this region. Obviously, it's not just Dexter that's putting in the hard work as well. All of his teammates have certainly been absolutely huge, but the fact that he's IGL'd them to this, I think it's something that we as a region can be very proud of, and back, where he's gone from playing on Greyhound to now this.
I think it's really impressive because it's after coming in, in place of someone like Carrigan. He has innovated the team, it looks like, into something that is, he's been using. Rops is going to be insane regardless, right? But someone like Frozen,
he's cracked,
he's turned the sum of the parts into something greater in a very respectable amount of time. It has been a couple months, but to go from where he was at, he has raised the ceiling of Mousesports so high. And this was just the European RMR. So admittedly, there's teams that were, we didn't see any of the CIS teams, and two of them are top 5, top 3 even teams in the world, and there wasn't really any other competition outside of that. But this is still amazing. We don't know what their floor is. We don't know how far they can go down, but it's very. I was talking about this with people that it's reminds me of the old Extremum when they were, Renegades at the time, and those massive runs they had at the major when Azza and Kassad would sit down and they would just have all this amazing, new strategies, new plans, new procedures. They would go and they would do these really deep runs at like back-to-back events. And I just see that with Dexter and Mytha. It's a really cool relationship. Them going from Renegades into Mouse Sports, taking first, against Nip, notorious cheaters. Hopefully they don't replay that final. No, I won't go into this.
40%.
Yeah, bro, that's all the Twitch chat is too. Like you just watch like any match now, and every time there's a tech pause, it's like 40%. But I also look at Twitch chat, and it's no longer like Dexter is trash. It's always like Sexter, and then it's really really cool. I think a lot of people are also starting to warm up to the idea that he's the shit.
Yeah, he's a big brand IGL. He's been, instrumental in his role in teams here. And while I'm just really glad that it's finally starting to pay off and that, people that were really, doubting that anything would come of this, that he'd get replaced in 2 months, that kind of getting proven wrong in a sense, especially if they're able to keep up this form, which I really hope they can.
100%. In terms of the other teams that we sort of saw playing, I know Complexity finished 10th at this RMR. I've been watching a lot of Complexity lately. They had an impressive sort of run at IEM Summer, but just kind of got banged by Gambit. Not really a lot you can do against the top team. Been watching them at Blast. I think my sort of stance on Complexity stays the same in that it's nothing to do with JKS in the sense, but it's just there's issues in that team. That team is not rotten, but I just don't think the parts make any sense. And you constantly see the games that they win where JKS pops off. We know he can. We see it. IEM Summer, he had some stellar performances, top of the board, playing really well. At Blast last night, I'm watching him like vintage JKS. Just he's holding spots that he shouldn't be able to get kills, and he'll just clean people up, and it's super impressive. And then they'll just lose. Like they'll start on Nuke and they'll get rounds in the lead. They'll win halves on Mirage, and it just sort of falls apart. So it sucks because we want to see our boy succeed, but I don't necessarily. Now that we've seen the sort of the height and flaw of Complexity, and I like that example, right? Because you get where it can get to, how low it can go, and where they average. I think Mouse Sports is like way more tantalizing, and I think CoL is kind of not running its course, but I don't know. I think that they're just going to sort of like stay where they are in terms of ranking, unless they sort of like reinvent the wheel or make some changes.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm obviously hoping to see things improve for them, but at the moment, I think it's very similar to what we were kind of saying in the last episode a while back, where things just aren't really going as we'd sort of hoped for Complexity. But
it's there.
I think
all the pieces are there.
Yeah, the pieces are there. It's just, for whatever reason, hasn't come together as much as we would have maybe hoped to see. But look, I really want to see, like, I think that Justin can do an absolutely massive bang up job on this team, and I think all the other pieces, like all his teammates as well, like I think it's definitely there. It's just at the moment, with the way things are going, it's just a bit more of a journey to get there. Whether or not that journey includes any other roster moves happening, or if some roles get swapped around, or whatever they're able to do, maybe they'll, who knows, maybe they'll just go scrap everything else and just pick up Ancient for a couple months. Who knows? Maybe, like, who knows? Like, it's all whatever it is they need to get done to get some results up. It's all internal. It's all things that we can only speculate on. But I'm just hoping that we will be able to see that coming, hopefully sometime soon, and see, my boy JKS deliver some more. We'd
We've
love to see it.
we've slowly weaved our way pretty much through every RMR at this point, so it's fitting that we end at the best ran one, CS Summit 8, because Extremum were there and they finished third overall. My biggest qualm with Extremum is I don't get to see them play enough. They just aren't playing as regularly as all these other teams, which really sucks, man. But that has its advantages, right? Especially with Kassad around, you can really sort of do a lot of cheeky stuff, right? You can nerd out on Ancient. They might whip it out. I don't know.
Maybe.
What did you get a chance to watch much Extremum at Summit?
I've had a look over some of the results and stuff like that, but unfortunately haven't been able to watch as much as I would have hoped.
Yeah.
But even despite that, it's still good to see, just looking purely over results anyway. I think it's really good to see that maybe they're starting to get to a point where they once were, where, I think we can all kind of agree that there was a bit of a drop-off after they left 100 Thieves. That's undeniable, where they were playing in, the Snow Sweet Snow events, and they were playing, all these smaller things and getting absolutely, the shit beaten out of them by, relatively unknown teams.
Yeah.
And I'm really glad that it's gone from that, where it was just looking...
It was just weird.
Look, I was just relying on pure copium there to get me by that period of time. But, but now it seems that, things at the very least are getting to a similar level. I want to see if they can try and push beyond and go as hard as they possibly can to, continue improving and continue that drive. As you said, they've got Kassad by them, and they're, starting to work things out. And I think them under Extremum overall has been just really interesting, as an organization with Extremum. The one thing I'm really glad about is that they're doing one thing which 100 Thieves didn't, which is
the content.
Exactly. Yeah.
Bro,
they're making so much
they've
content
been doing
with them.
is awesome. I have loved doing even the weird, I used to like watching all the Aussie slang, but now seeing all the Serbian slang, I'm like, what is this? Yeah. And it's so good. No, I 100% agree. It's been really good to see. I know I sort of questioned it at the start when they were they're going to play in Europe, but they're going to go back to North America to qualify for the major, just so they could hold on to their RMR points. And even after copying the 120 point deduction for the roster move they made with Bentet, they're still leading. They're at this point, it's only Liquid and Fury are behind them for the legend status, and then EG are in all kinds of worlds of hurt at the moment. So it's very, very realistic that Extremum hold even the form that they're at the moment, and they're going to the major at the end of the year as a legend, which that's pretty good to see. I'm very, very pleased.
Awesome.
So I think I just want to see them play more games, because I can't really give any more thoughts on them as a competitive team playing against Gambit and Australis and Nip and whatnot, because there's just not a lot of games there really. They played Summit, and then it's just all these cups, man, like the Fun Spark Ulti, the Spring Sweet Spring. I can't wait to see them play against Mouse Sports, man.
Yeah, no, really same. Good. I think it's also going to be really interesting. I think where the whole international scene is going to become a bit more interesting is when we get to see that return to LAN, which by the time the major's around, that will be at that point.
Yeah,
I believe, and it's going to be really cool to see how, because I think a lot of people also, just on a side note, a lot of people have this kind of mentality at the moment where it's they're thinking that, all these onliner teams are going to absolutely get just punched down to where they belong as soon as the trip to LAN happens. But what people are forgetting is that it's not just those online teams that have had to play online for the last year and a half or however long. It's been every team. Everyone is going to have to readjust. Every team is going to have to get back to playing in front of a crowd or playing, in person, and, playing with that lower ping and having that different kind of feel and adjusting to, getting on a PC that's not theirs, and being in an unfamiliar environment.
If
It's
you
going to be
think
something
about
where everyone's going to have to get back to that.
All the top teams, right? Like a lot of them have made these changes where they've brought in players that just haven't had this experience. Like, Grim hasn't really played a lot of lands with Liquid. All of these, Nip, like heaps of the players super young. It's going to be kind of not a wake-up call, but I agree. I think everyone's going to get back to LAN and have the jitters. I just think some teams, dude, even like Bubsky, it's not like he necessarily played heaps of LANs before he was on Astralis, but I think some of those super hard, like veteran teams, like honestly, like Extremum, they're super used to being uncomfortable all the time because they're always out and about. They haven't been home in ages. I think some teams will adjust quicker than others, but yeah, when this major rolls around, everyone's going to be kind of like,
Yeah.
But yeah, very excited. It's a shame Extremum, they're like the only team that we follow overseas that aren't going to be at Cologne, which sucks. Complexity, Renegades, Mouz, all there, but
yeah. Well, I
no Extremum.
I think that also kind of probably does segue us well into, while we're on the international stuff, what's
coming
looking
up
ahead. Yeah, I think what's the events that's coming up. So a couple things: ANZ Champs, IEM. Which one you want to tackle first, Ash?
I will quickly do Cologne then because I accidentally already brought it up, but it's going to be huge. It's how many teams is this? I'm looking at it now. Is it 12? Can't count. But it's meant to be this massive sort of. I actually can't count. I don't know how many teams that is. What's 4x4? So like 16. There's 24 teams. Awesome. And everyone's here pretty much. Renegades, CoL, Mouz. That's going to be really exciting, and they're going to be able to play against everybody. Gambit, Navi, Heroic, VP. While it's not strictly, an Aussie event, whatever, it's going to be really cool to see if Renegades have been spending all of this time while they were overseas and while they're back home, just sort of maybe they are dropping maps here because they're actually just, studying everybody else. Mouz, are they going to keep up this form? Are they going to smash Gambit? Is Complexity going to, like nosedive and explode, or are they just going to like work out overnight what to do and go on a massive run? I think that there's, for the the Australian perspective, lots of really cool potential in this event, and is 100% worth watching.
Oh, absolutely! It's going to be really cool to see how things go with Cologne. Again, Cologne, one of those like top events of the year, albeit under a new name, which I'll never get used to. IEM Cologne.
Yeah,
but it just feels off. But
yeah,
but
even Vici are there as well. So there's some Asian stuff in there as well.
Like this is going to be one of those events where it's like, now that things are going back to getting all these international teams together and having them play on the same servers and having this whole mix of like it's really cool to see things going back like that, and it's going to be really interesting to see how teams like from our kind of region perspective of having Renegades in there, having some Oceanic players on the likes of Mouse Sports and Complexity, but also seeing how I think a lot of the other international roster moves are going all over. Like I think just as a fan of CS in general, international wise, this is going to be a banger of an event, and I really can't wait to see it.
Yeah, oh yeah. It's worth losing sleep over, in my opinion. We'll come back home, back into some domestic Counter-Strike, but the next season of ANZ Champs, season 13. Did I get that right?
Yeah, season 13.
Nailed it, as always. That's coming up, and so there's open qualifiers. I think one is happening this weekend, and 4 teams will come through, and there's an open qualifier next weekend where another 4 teams. And what they'll do, unlike the first season where there was 4 invited teams, the teams who placed top 8 at the end of the last season have gone through automatically. So just a recap, that's Order, Direwolves, Vertex, and Paradox, as well as Chiefs, Dynasty, Simplicity, and Animal Squad. No Renegades. They don't play. It doesn't look like they have any interest in playing the ANZ Champs, especially since they'll have to be going overseas again. But
Yeah.
Seeing Dynasty and Simplicity, that's what I like about ANZ Champs. You get to see these sort of teams sort of creep in there. I was having a look at the Open Qual, and at least in this weekend's one, there's teams like 8Ballers, which I think would be super, super exciting to see them.
That'd be really
my
cool.
other personal favorite, BBB MBCBS. But what I'm getting at is that I think the best part about ANZ Champs is it's a meaningful tournament. We somehow blend it, and it works. It's a meaningful tournament in Australia that is got really good content, really good commentary, and it's just sort of a mix of some teams that we don't always get to see. It gets to elevate some of the lower teams. Some of the top teams still get to play competitively. It almost shouldn't work, but it does, and it's such an amazing product that we have.
Yeah. Speaking of that open qualifier this weekend, I saw teams this morning as well waking up at 8:30, and then it got pushed back by 2 hours. Which all I'll say on that front is I was also up at 8:30 a.m., but not because of that, but because of some dumb uni assignment.
Yeah.
Putting an exam at 8:30 a.m. on a Saturday on the weekend of the ANZ qualifiers as well. Uni really has done me dirty there. But
sorted out higher education system. What are you doing?
Yeah. Counter-Strike comes first, clearly.
Exactly. But I guess if we assume that Renegades aren't going to be there, do you have any sort of early predictions about this season? Obviously, Rooster also won't be there, following some things that happened in the last season, which you can go back to other episodes and listen up on.
Yeah. So I think it's definitely going to come down a lot as well in terms of which of those lower tier teams coming in through the open qualifier is who's going to show up there, really. I think that just looking at the current standings for this weekend's qualifier, by the time this episode comes out, probably you'll already have the results of all that. But at the moment, we're recording on the Saturday night, and at the moment, there's Camo and Fury in the upper bracket. They're 8Ballers and Alki, I think that's how you say that, as well as Skyfire and BBM-CBS. Definitely some... You're smiling.
I love that. I love it so much.
You love it. Skyfire has definitely been looking rather interesting in terms of they were also playing at the Guam event. They're looking pretty interesting, but also Fury has been doing some good stuff in Challenger or in some of those in LPL. Not sure if it was Challenger but 8Ballers. I think they definitely overall have been a team to watch for quite some time as well. I think I've got my eye on 8Ballers. And if they make it into ANZ Champs, as you said, that'll be really cool because it's by far been like the biggest come off of any team in OCE in general. Because again, they finished 2020 in an open league in LPLA. And if they're able to, with having a bit of coaching and really taking this seriously, come all the way to ANZ Champs, that's a really cool story right there.
Super cool.
Yeah. So it's going to be really about how these open qualifiers goes. As you say, there's another next weekend, but I think with Renegades out of the equation, given that they're not playing ANZ, unless they just happen to show up next weekend to get an open qualifier, oh god, imagine that you show up, you're ready to just play some similar teams, and then fucking Renegades just comes out of nowhere and just gets seated against.
You're just chilling in the server ready, and you just see Inns has joined, Alistair's get me out.
Oh man.
Yeah.
But I think out of the teams we're seeing there, it's very well a similar story. I'm very keen to see how Chiefs go with this new lineup and hope they stick by it, as I was saying before. But Order Direwolves, Vertex, Paradox, all really interesting to watch teams that I think are really cementing themselves in that kind of top 4, top 6 position. And I think it's going to go relatively the same as we've seen a lot of the other ones, as we've seen a lot of the other things go in the last month and a half. But it's going to be a really cool season. I think there's a lot that ESL are very well bringing to the table for ANZ Champs in general. It's been one of the most fun to watch products and most fun to watch premier product of OCE. It's definitely my favorite thing. Yeah, I'm really keen to see this, and I'm really keen to see also the improvements of teams like Order and Direwolves and to that top level as they just strive to really try and just take this event out.
Yeah, cool. Well, I think that really puts a nice little bow on top of everything we had to talk about this week. It's been a hot minute, but now that I can say with confidence we're both done with all of our necessary crap, that lots of opportunity, hopefully, for some exciting stuff coming through Snowball in the next couple, I don't know, hours, days, weeks, months, whatever. But otherwise, I guess stay tuned for the next episodes of Roundup in the future, and be sure to remember to check us out on all of the different podcasting things you can find us. So Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Pocket Casts, all those
We're
links,
on everything.
all those links, all your favorite ones, all your not favorite ones as well. We're there. Luther and I, you can find us with our ats. There we go. And also, I would love to extend. Please send us questions or just comments, or we'd love to engage with anyone who's willing to do so. And hopefully, we'll put together some cool new stuff in the coming episodes. Otherwise, as always, massive thanks to Snowball and Blue for making this happen. I guess. Anything else? What have I missed?
We'll just say that obviously this episode we've kind of been going more into recap mode than we normally do. You might have noticed a little bit of a different structure, and we're
generic filler episode.
We're definitely experimenting with things. We've got a lot of things happening behind the scenes as well that are going to be very interesting over here at Snowball, and with this podcast in general. But we definitely want to bring back also looking at doing more of that feature content, since both of us now are on our uni break and we're going to be grinding out content and doing all that. We want to see if we can get some more people involved as well. So, if you're a OC player and you feel like you've got some insight, send us a DM. We might be able to get you on as a guest for an episode. We're looking to have some guest hosts as well, and try and spice things up. And lastly, of course, we started off playing around with that question segment in that previous episode with MJ. Didn't get that around this time, but
if you've had a couple of drinks and you're at GG Easy or whatever, okay, feel free to just record and just send. Okay.
Yeah, no, but I love that idea. I love that segment. So if you've got any questions you want to ask us about the state of anything OCCS, feel free to DM us on Twitter, and we might be able to chuck you up. But yeah, as always, thanks to Snowball and Blue Microphones, and thank you for listening to this podcast. We'll be back with the next one. Hopefully not as far away. Hopefully not as big of a gap for next time.
Go get those victory royales.